Salvation in Christianity. Salvation in Christianity, also called deliverance or redemption, is the saving of human beings from death and separation from God by Christ's death and resurrection, and the justification following this salvation. While the idea of Jesus' death as an atonement for human sin was derived from the Hebrew writings and was elaborated in Paul's epistles and in the gospel, Paul saw the faithful redeemed by participation in Jesus' death and rising. Early Christians regarded themselves as partaking in a new covenant with God, open to both Jews and Gentiles, due to the sacrificial death and subsequent exaltation of Jesus Christ. Early Christian notions of the person and sacrificial role of Jesus in human salvation were further elaborated by the Church Fathers, medieval writers, and modern scholars in various atonement theories such as the ransom theory, Christus Victor theory, the recapitulation theory, the sanctification theory, the penal substitution theory, and the moral influence theory. Variant views on salvation are among the main four lies divided in various Christian denominations, including conflicting definitions of sin and depravity, the sinful nature of humankind, justification, God's means of removing the consequences of sin, and atonement, the forgiving or the pardon of sin through the suffering and death and resurrection of Jesus. Salvation in Christianity, or deliverance or redemption, is the saving of human beings from death and separation from God by Christ's death and resurrection. Christian salvation not only concerns the atonement itself, but also the question how one partakes of this salvation by faith, baptism, or obedience. And the question of this salvation is individual or collective. It further involves questions regarding the afterlife, heaven, hell, soul sleep, and annihilation, and the purgatory. The four lines between the various denominations include conflicting definitions of sin, justification, and atonement. Christian hermeneutology describes sin as an act of offense against God by despising His person and Christian biblical law, and by injuring others. It is an evil human act which violates the rational nature of man, as well as God's nature and His eternal law. According to the classical definition of Augustine of Hippo, sin is a word, deed, or desire in opposition to the eternal law of God. Christian tradition has explained sin as a fundamental aspect of human existence due to original sin, also called ancestral sin, the fall of man stemming from Adam's rebellion in Eden by eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. Paul espouses it in Romans 5:12-19. And Augustine of Hippo popularizes it in the West, developed into a notion of hereditary sin, arguing that God holds all the descendants of Adam and Eve accountable for Adam's sin of rebellion, and as such all people deserve God's wrath and condemnation, apart from many actual sins they personally committed. Total depravity, also called radical corruption or pervasive depravity, is a Protestant theological doctrine derived from the concept of original sin. It is the teaching that as a consequence of the fall of man, every person born into the world is enslaved to the service of sin as a result of the inherited fallen nature, and apart from the figure of the prevenient grace of God, is utterly unable to choose to follow God, refrain from evil, or accept a gift of salvation as it is offered. It is advocated to various degrees by many Protestant confessions of faith and catechism, including those of some Lutheran synods, and Calvinism, teaching irresistible grace. Arimaneans, such as Methodists, also believe and teach total depravity, but with the distinct difference of teaching prevenient grace. Thank you.